Sandy Blair is an attractive, married woman, a loving wife and mother. She is petite, only 152 centimeters tall, with the figure of a young girl, 71, 51, 76 cm, weighs just under 40 kilograms. Her slender physique makes her legs look longer than those of women of her height. Sandy's light brown hair falls just below her shoulders. Thanks to her small breasts and thin waist, she could easily pass for a 13-year-old girl. Sandy's big brown eyes invite you to drown in them as she looks straight at you. A small nose and full lips complete the look. Her skin is soft and smooth, with barely noticeable facial wrinkles. Sandy and Alex have been married for 19 years, and she recently turned 38 years old. Alex is 10 years older than her, he is 48. Their only daughter, Tanya, now 18, is in college and lives separately. Sandy and Alex have always had a happy marriage, and their sex life has been rich and harmonious. Sandy has always been unpretentious in everyday life. She likes to be close to Alex and do what he loves. She works full-time at an accounting firm and usually dresses in business casual. But on Fridays, loose-fitting days, she prefers to wear jeans. Sandy has been in this position for less than a year. She and Alex both recently changed careers. Alex went back to school at 34 to pursue an engineering degree, and Sandy completed her accounting degree a year ago. It was a sunny Friday morning, and we were both getting ready for work. Sandy wore low-waisted skinny jeans, high-heeled sandals, and a blue ruffled blouse with puffy short sleeves. The blouse had an elastic waist, hugged her flat stomach, and ended just above her belly button, allowing the jeans to highlight her slender figure. The jeans fit tightly, emphasizing long, slender legs and delicious hips. "Sandy, don't you think this is too loose a style for the job?" Alex asked. "I don't think so," she replied. "Last week, Barb said that in the summer you can afford a little more relaxed style than in the winter." Barb is Sandy's coworker and friend. On weekends, they go shopping together and sometimes have a cocktail after work. Alex hadn't met Barb yet, but Sandy said she was the youngest in their department. She is 22 years old and unmarried. Unlike petite Sandy, Barb is a tall blonde with long legs, blue eyes, and D-cup breasts. Her height is 178 centimeters, that is, she is even 2 centimeters taller than Alex. Alex is a man of average build, 175 centimeters tall and weighing about 86 kilograms. He used to exercise regularly and still maintains a strong figure, although he has relaxed a bit over the past couple of years. His thick black and silver hair, icy blue eyes, and bushy mustache give him the look of an old Western cowboy. He is about 175 centimeters tall and weighs approximately 86 kilograms. Alex used to work out regularly. Alex and Sandy both enjoy spending time outdoors and maintain a deep bronze tan all year round using a tanning bed they bought last year. Sandy was in the hallway, putting away one of the files she was working on, when John came up to her and asked, "Sandy, could you come into my office when you have a minute?" Without turning around, she replied that she would come in a couple of minutes. Sandy walked into John's office and asked, "Well, Johnny, what can I do for you?" She walked around the table and leaned against its edge. John looked at her slowly and replied, "You should know what you can do for me, and I would really like to show you what I can do for you." Sandy replied, "Come on, John, I'm busy and I don't have time for this." She moved away from the table a little, but noticed how John was watching her every move. She liked the attention, but she wasn't going to show it. John turned his chair so that he was looking directly at her and said, "Sandy, you look great in those jeans. I just wanted to invite you to come with us tonight." Sandy noticed the bulge in John's jeans and could almost feel his gaze burning into her pelvis. She looked him straight in the eye and said, "John, you know that I am happily married, and I am not going to cheat on my husband." John placed his large hand on the small of her back and slowly began to move it down, trying to touch her buttocks. Sandy began to move away as he tried to move his hand lower. "That's part of the appeal, Sandy," he said. "The thought of making love to another man's wife is a real thrill for me." Sandy replied, "John, could you act like a gentleman? No need to be so pushy. Barb and I have talked about this before. Maybe we'll see you there, but I need to get back to work, big boy. She lightly touched his large shoulder and turned to leave. As Sandy returned to her desk, she felt her heart pounding and wondered if she could continue to resist his advances. Sandy called Alex around 1:30 p.m. and asked if he had any plans for the evening. Nothing special, Alex replied. What do you suggest? Well, several people from the company are going to the club tonight. I think you would be interested in meeting them, and they say the group there is good. Alex replied. That sounds interesting. What time are we going? Sandy replied. We could have dinner and be there by 9. Alex agreed and Sandy said, Love you. See you at home after work. I got home before Sandy and decided to relax for a while on the terrace with a drink. It was really warm, so I changed into shorts, poured myself a bourbon and Coke, and settled into the lounge chair. I wasn't wearing a shirt, so I thought I'd get some sun while Sandy didn't get back. I was already on my second glass when Sandy came out onto the terrace. Hi, handsome, she said. I asked where she had been. Sandy replied that she bought a new blouse at the mall, and then said that she needed to get ready and went into the house. I followed her to pour myself another drink. I heard the water running in the bathroom, so I went to the bedroom to choose what to wear. Her outfit lay on the bed: white trousers and a black translucent blouse. She chose her favorite black high heels that make her look a couple of centimeters taller. I put on light brown pants and a yellow button-down shirt, which I think is enough. I had just finished when Sandy came into the room in her short robe from her shower. I decided to finish my drink while watching her get dressed. I settled into a chair in the corner of the room, overlooking the bed and the large mirror in front of which Sandy liked to dress. I picked up a travel magazine and began idly flipping through the pages when she took off her robe and threw it on the chair by the dressing table. Sandy looked amazing from behind. She stood combing her hair. Her legs were closed, but I could still see a tiny diamond of light between her thighs. Sandy noticed my gaze in the mirror, spread her legs slightly, and playfully wiggled her hips. She asked, Do you like what you see? I stood up, walked over to her, and grabbed her around her thin waist. I'm a happy person. You're incredibly sexy, I said, clasping her firm left thigh with my hand. My other hand slid down her stomach, but she gently pushed it away. Go downstairs and make me the same cocktail while I get dressed, she said. Leave this for later. I didn't argue. A few minutes later, I returned with a drink and Sandy was sitting in front of her vanity putting on her makeup. Thank you, she said, without looking up from the mirror. I'll be down soon. I took the hint and decided to return to the terrace. 10 minutes later, Sandy came out onto the terrace. Well, how do I look? She asked, turning slightly sideways. She walked to the edge of the terrace where the sun was behind her. Her white pants looked almost see-through. I hadn't realized how thin the fabric was when I saw them in the bedroom. The pants sat even lower than her favorite jeans. I asked her to turn around slowly. As she turned sideways, I noticed her firm breasts showing through her thin black top. Today, she was without a bra, which is unusual for her, especially if she is going to a public place. The black top hit mid-ribs and had a wide elastic band at the bottom, but sat loosely on her small breasts. When she turned her back, I said that her panties were visible through her pants. She looked back at her butt. I have a white thong in my closet. I'll change, she said. When she came back, I didn't tell her that the thong was just as visible as the previous panties, but it looked even hotter. The white trousers reached her mid-calf, and she looked great in black heels. Her diamond engagement ring sparkled in the sun. Then I noticed the ankle bracelet. Sandy, do you have a new bracelet? I don't remember seeing him before, I said. She replied, Barb gave it to me. Do you like it? Sandy put her foot on the step leading back into the house so I could get a better look. I saw that it was a thin gold chain with a small pendant. The pendant read, Hot Wife. Everyone already knows you're hot, my dear. I don't think it needs to be advertised, I said. I thought it was cute, she replied. I winked and said, It's okay, Sandy, Let's go. After we stopped at a Mexican restaurant for dinner and margaritas, we headed to the club. It was very busy there. There was too much going on. We found a table with Sandy's friends and settled in with drinks. The most talkative was Barb, who tried too hard to make me feel like part of the group. Apart from another husband, there were only women at the table, so I started talking to him. Ted turned out to be a nice guy. Although he felt a little out of place, he was looking forward to spending the evening playing poker with his usual Friday company. But his wife did not agree to his proposal to let her go alone for the evening. The women talked mostly about work, so Ted and I decided to play a couple of games of pool. During the second game, Ted drew my attention to a man who had just entered the bar. This is John. He works in a company where girls work. I don't know what his position is, but he's like a boss or something. I looked at him and said, "Damn, what a big guy." Ted said John played football in college for a couple of years. I asked Ted, "Do you think he's serving any of the girls at our table?" Ted replied that John met with this group every Friday, but he had not heard rumors that he was dating any of them. Sandy never goes out on Fridays unless we go together, so she's clearly not from Big John's harem, I said. About that moment, the hottest girl in the bar walked up to us, accompanied by the biggest man I've ever seen up close. Sandy came up and said, "John, meet my husband Alex." I extended my hand. "Hello, John." And then I felt like a 6-year-old child shaking hands with an adult. I stood up to his chest, and he looked like he was carved from stone. He had curly blonde hair and bright blue eyes. John was wearing a tight t-shirt that looked like it had been painted on, and his arms were thicker than Sandy's waist. His square chest and abs were clearly visible through his t-shirt. His jeans fit snugly, and his legs were as powerful and defined as the rest of him. I'm not used to noticing other men, but it was hard not to notice the large bulge in his jeans. He was clearly built like a stallion. Sandy led us back to the table, where we continued to enjoy drinks and music. We sat around the table, and everyone was clearly having a great time. Then suddenly the lights went down, the stage lit up, and the band began their second set. It was only then that I realized how see-through Sandy's top was. As she sat between me and the stage lights, I saw the clear silhouette of her luscious, small breasts. I started to get excited. I noticed that Big John also glanced in that direction more than once. He sat next to me, and it was easy for him to see what I saw. Then the stage lights went out, and the regular bar lights came back on. Now Sandy's top was no longer so revealing. I breathed a sigh of relief. In normal light, it looked decent, and it wasn't even obvious that she wasn't wearing a bra, since the lights in the bar were dim. Sandy stood up to go to the restroom with Barb, and I noticed how clearly her thong was visible through the thin material of her white pants. But this didn't bother me at all. There were other women in the bar clearly showing off their thongs. Sandy's outfit looked stylish, with a slight hint of sexuality, but not vulgar. As Big John headed toward the bar to get another drink, he noticed 2 men walking behind Sandy, staring at her butt a little too clearly. John put a hand on each of their necks and said, "Be more polite." And he added, "I don't think you want to cause her any trouble. She's married to my best friend." I thought that they would both be scared out of their wits. John released them, and they hurried away, grateful to be unharmed. John continued on his way to the bar, and Sandy returned to the table. "Did you see what just happened?" she asked. "I saw what happened, but I didn't hear what those guys said before John intervened," I answered. "They walked behind me and discussed what they would like to do with my butt." "It's good that John stopped them," she said. "He was in the right place at the right time. If I were there, I would calm them down myself," I said. John returned with more drinks, placed them on the table, and I thanked him for defending my wife's honor. "They were being rude, and no woman needs to hear that," John said. Sandy also thanked him, to which he replied, "You're welcome, but now you owe me a dance." Sandy looked at me, then at John, and said it would be okay. Soon the lights went out again, and the show of transparent outfits resumed. The third song was slow, and John asked Sandy to dance. She agreed, and they joined the crowd dancing in front of the stage. The stage lights illuminated Sandy's white pants, highlighting the outline of her slender legs. I looked at her and thought how sexy she was and how lucky I was. John and Sandy danced, keeping quite a good distance, but about halfway through the song, he put his huge hands on her thin waist. He could easily wrap one arm around her waist. He then pulled her closer to him and hugged her. Her head was now resting against his lower chest. She looked so small next to him. Suddenly, Barb brought me out of my thoughts. Don't worry about John. He's a bit of a playboy, but your Sandy only has eyes for you. How do you know? I asked. Barb responded that John likes to flirt a little, but Sandy always reminds him that she is happily married. Thank you for telling me. I was already starting to get a little nervous, I admitted. She hugged me and said, "You're welcome, dear, but sometimes I wish he would look at me the same way." You mean he's not looking? I thought you had quite a following. You're a very attractive girl, I replied. She kissed me on the cheek and said, I think I understand now why Sandy loves you so much. Barb headed to the bar for another cocktail. As she left, I couldn't help but notice her long legs showing through her light dress. Her walk was very sexy, and I thought I would love to see her on the dance floor in that dress under the stage lights. Sure enough, a few songs later, John asked Barb to dance, and she agreed without hesitation. As she walked in front of the stage, the light illuminated her dress, revealing a stunning picture of her slender legs. Sandy looked at me and said, Alex, I think I've had enough to drink. Take me home, Daddy. We parked at the house and walked around to the patio. I opened the door and Sandy sat down on a chair by the table on the deck. I started making myself a drink when I heard Sandy shout, Me too. I went out onto the terrace with 2 glasses. Sandy, you have no idea how hot you look today, I said. Thank you, Alex, she replied and took a long sip from her glass. When the lights went out and the stage lights came on, the people sitting where John and I were could see your chest, I continued. Is it true? That's why John started to fantasize. It still infuriates me that he thought he could pull me so close while dancing. Did you see what he did? She asked. I saw him pull you, but I didn't notice anything particularly offensive, I replied. Sandy took another sip and said she didn't want to talk about it. Then she stood up and walked over to the lounge, leaning her elbows on it. She gave me the most playful look, and without looking away, she took off her top right there on the terrace. Some of the neighbors' windows were still glowing, and I said, Let's go inside. It seems you've had too many cocktails, dear. She continued to look at me, stood up from the lounge, naked to the waist, and raised her hands up. Carry me to the bedroom and put me to bed, Daddy, she said. I walked up to her, and she wrapped her arms around my neck. I put my hands under her butt, and she raised her legs and wrapped them around my waist. I then carried her up the stairs to our bedroom. She lay down on the bed and asked me to take off her pants, so I took off my shirt and pants and lay down on the bed. I unbuttoned her pants and unzipped her. I kissed her navel and reached behind her back. She lifted herself up a little as I removed her pants. I got pretty hard despite all the alcohol I had in me. We started kissing, and I hugged her softly as she put my hand on her waist. I felt that she was very excited. You're a little naughty today, aren't you? I smiled, feeling her embarrassment and joy. She replied, Yes, I think I went a little overboard. I held her wrist with my hands, and we continued to hug tenderly. It felt like time had stopped, and we were immersed in each other with every moment. A few minutes later, we were just cuddling, enjoying the silence and closeness to each other. I went downstairs to get something to drink while Sandy stayed in the bathroom. Usually, we behaved more calmly and relaxed, but today there was a special moment that brought us even closer. When I returned to the bedroom, she was already in a t-shirt and cozy cotton shorts. She crawled up to me and looked at me with her big eyes, full of warmth and joy. When John danced with me, I noticed he got a little excited, she said with a smile. I tried to move away a little, but he still tried to be close to keep me close. Sandy lay next to me, feeling my presence, and told me this story with a quiet smile. I listened to her, and some special connection reigned between us, which could not be expressed in words. We just enjoyed a moment of intimacy and trust. I have to be honest with you. He's been coming to see me at work for quite some time now. I mentioned that her friend Barb told me that John liked to flirt with her. She continued, I always remind him that I am happily married and faithful to my husband. But I have to admit, he almost wore me out tonight when he wrapped his big arms around my waist. I felt my body press a little closer to her leg as she continued, he's usually very nice and respectful, like when he stopped those two from making comments about me. I noticed that she clearly understood what was happening to me. She leaned in slightly and began to maintain contact. A small smile appeared on her lips, which she tried to contain. Sandy said, can you believe how confident and determined he is? He looks older than his age, doesn't he? Not wanting to hear the truth, I asked her if she had ever thought about being with someone like Big John. I felt tension rise within me as I asked this question, and Sandy, despite her best efforts, could not hide her smile. She then asked, does talking about this excite you? Just laying here next to you makes me ecstatic, Sandy, but I admit that when the stage lights came up, and knowing that someone other than me was enjoying the braless view through your top made me a little nervous. Sandy then told me that she didn't dream about John, but he was a little persistent in his desire for her to date him, and he wasn't the only one. This is, of course, nothing new. Sandy has always had fans, but she usually doesn't tell me much about it. The only thing is, Alex, I was young when we got married, and I've never been with anyone else, so yes, and I think it's natural to be sexually curious about being with someone else. Never think about it. I replied, Sandy, honey, it would break my heart if you had sex with someone else. Then she said, I wouldn't have known it from how excited you were. Sandy, I just want you, can we make love again now? She replied, it's late, Alex. I'm tired and I need to get some sleep, okay? I reluctantly turned off the lamp and we went to bed. Sandy packs for a business trip. Sandy is going on a business trip. The next day, we just stayed at home and sat on the terrace enjoying the good weather. Sandy was in her white two-piece bikini, and I was still wearing the same shorts I was wearing last night. I only wore them for an hour and had no intention of throwing them in the laundry basket. A neighbor from across the street came by for a beer and a chat, but most likely he just wanted to flirt with Sandy. She came out onto the terrace shortly after he arrived and said, oh, hi, Steve. I saw you washing your car in the driveway. Would you like to wash mine at the same time? Steve replied that he would be happy to help if she did the washing, and he watered with a hose. Sandy said, yes, and I trust you with this hose. You're not going to splash cold water on me, are you? They joked a bit, and Steve returned to his place. Later, Barb came by and persuaded Sandy to go shopping with her, and while they were gone, I decided to take out my laptop and surf the internet. I started looking for information about cheating wives, although I didn't think that Sandy was cheating on me. However, I was uncomfortable with her mentioning sexual curiosity. During my search, I came across many sites dedicated to so-called hot wives. Then I remembered Sandy's ankle bracelet with the inscription Hot Wife and began to look for information on this topic. Hot wives are married women who have sex on the side. They don't consider it cheating because their husbands not only allow them to do it, but also encourage them. I began to wonder if Sandy was trying to steer me toward this lifestyle. But no, it doesn't look like her. She said that Barb gave her this bracelet. Sandy probably doesn't even know what hot wife means. It made me laugh that my wife wears such a bracelet without understanding the meaning. Over the next couple of weeks, I started reading more hot wife stories and realized that they turned me on. I thought about my sexy wife with other men and how I would take it. I knew I didn't want to lose her, but I also knew I couldn't handle her spending time with someone else. She started dressing a little sexier for work, and she definitely dressed more boldly when we went out. True, she always looked stylish, not vulgar. One evening, we were watching a movie about a woman who cheated on her husband with a coworker. Sandy snuggled up with me on the couch, and we had a few drinks. She was wearing her light cotton pajamas with pink hearts, which she bought in the children's department where she sometimes found things that fit better. I was wearing cotton gym shorts. The movie reminded me of John, and that night we went to the club. I asked her if John had harassed her at work. Her hand slid down from my stomach to my thigh. She said John had been promoted and moved to their office in Colorado. I asked if she missed the attention he gave her. She said he always acted professionally at work, but he let her know that he would be happy to invite her somewhere. She added, he was seductive, young, very handsome, strong, and very sexy. If I was free, I would let him invite me. But I'm married to the love of my life. We watched the film in silence for some time. Then I told her that I loved her enough that I could forgive her if she cheated on me. She had a slight smile that she tried to hide. She then said, I haven't told you this yet, but next Wednesday the firm will be sending me and one of the senior accountants to the Colorado branch to help with the audit. Can you cope without me for a few days? I replied, why didn't you tell me about this before? I wasn't prepared for this, although when she started working for her company, she was told that there would be times when she would have to travel. So, I'm sure your buddy John will be glad to see you, I said. Sandy tried to console me by saying, Alex, it's not my fault. I didn't volunteer and I really don't want to, but I have no choice. As for John, I'm not going to have an affair behind my back, and he already knows that. Then I said something I shouldn't have said. What are you going to do? Ask my permission first. I couldn't believe what she said next. What would you say if I asked permission to meet John while I was away? As soon as she said this, I felt her hand lightly slide over the fabric of my shorts. This unexpected touch immediately made me experience a whole range of feelings: embarrassment, interest, and a little anxiety. I tried to hide my emotions and decided to clarify her words, not quite understanding what she was driving at. What do you mean, let you go out? Are you talking about dinner, lunch, drinks, or something else? I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. She looked at me with a sly look, as if enjoying my confusion. Deciding to make things even more difficult for me, she said, what if I asked to be allowed to go into his bedroom with someone? Her eyes looked at me searchingly, waiting for a reaction. I fell silent, not knowing what to say. To be honest, her words left me confused. I was overcome by conflicting emotions. On the one hand, I felt jealousy, and on the other, some strange curiosity. My heart began to beat faster, and my mind began to swirl with questions that I didn't know how to ask. However, I tried to hold on and not show how much her question hurt me. She raised the corners of her lips, as if realizing that her words had caused a storm of emotions. She moved closer to me and laid her head on my shoulder. It seemed that her proximity only added tension, but at the same time calmed him. Her presence was so warm and cozy that my thoughts began to come into order a little. Do you really think this conversation is bothering me? I asked quietly, smiling faintly, trying to give my voice a frivolous sound. I didn't want her to think that her words had hurt me more than I was willing to admit. She turned her head to look at me and, without holding back a grin, replied, well, I think it's still catchy. Her voice was full of playfulness and hints. She clearly enjoyed my embarrassment. I sighed, trying to find the right words. There was a real hurricane raging inside me, but I knew that I had to be honest. Listen, I love you, and all I want is for you to be happy. Everything else doesn't matter, I said, looking her straight in the eyes. I wanted her to know that her well-being and her smile come first for me. She didn't say a word, but her face softened, and I saw a warm, sincere smile that melted all my fears and doubts. She sat down next to me, spreading her legs so she could get comfortable, and placing her hands on my shoulders, she pulled herself closer to me again. I could feel her breath on my face, her softness and warmth. At that moment, it seemed as if the whole world had simply disappeared, leaving the two of us in this cozy cocoon of intimacy. We sat in silence for some time, looking into each other's eyes. Words were no longer needed. Her smile and soft gaze said it all. She leaned towards me and whispered, "You know I'm just kidding, right?" There was a note of apology in her voice, and I realized that she did not want to hurt me. She was just playing, testing my reaction. I smiled, trying to make my smile as sincere and reassuring as possible. "Yes, of course I do," I replied with a slight shrug, as if to imply that it was all just a game and I was fine. However, I still felt some tension inside, but it gradually began to dissipate, giving way to relief and calm. She looked at me a little more, as if checking if I was really okay. Then, making sure I was no longer offended, she hugged me tighter, pressing herself against my chest. I ran my hand through her hair, feeling the softness of her curls. We sat like that for a while, forgetting about the strange conversation, just enjoying each other's closeness and warmth. As her breathing became more regular and she settled comfortably on my shoulder, I turned on the TV to continue watching the movie we had started before this whole conversation. The screen glowed with a soft light, and the room fell into calmness. It seemed that all misunderstandings and doubts had disappeared, giving way to silence and peace. Now, at this moment, I understood that it did not matter what the words were said. What was important was that we were close, that our hearts beat in unison, and that the love between us was stronger than any doubts or misunderstandings. We both took Tuesday off to spend the day together. I couldn't take my hands off her. We decided to pack a picnic basket and head to the lake. Sandy wore a t-shirt and a short blue denim skirt that fastened at the back with a zipper and button. She was wearing a bra under her t-shirt, and I said it looked a little tight. She replied that she didn't want to attract attention and just wanted to enjoy the day with me. I said it was a weekday and there would be no one in the park to disturb us. Sandy agreed, went upstairs to the bedroom, and returned wearing a different t-shirt. This time it was sleeveless and had a large neckline that reached to the shoulders. As soon as she leaned over a little, she could look down. "How do you like it?" she asked. I just wanted her to take off her bra and put the first t-shirt back on, but I didn't want to argue, so I said she looked amazing. She really looked amazing, just went a little further than I expected. I looked at her feet. She was wearing brown sandals, but no ankle bracelet. I've only seen her wear it once since the night I first noticed it. She wore it to work once, but I never saw it again. I wondered if maybe someone had told her something about him. Anyway, we headed to the park and found a great spot by the lake to relax. After lunch, we played frisbee for a bit. Soon, two young men approached us and offered to play with four of us. Sandy cheerfully replied, "Why not? Let's have some fun." One of the guys, his name was Dave, kept approaching Sandy. I realized he was trying to peek into her cleavage as she bent down to pick up the frisbee. I decided to take a break and go to the toilet. When I returned, I saw that both guys had taken out their phones. Don't tell me he's giving her his number, I thought. As I approached, one of them raised the phone to his ear and started talking to someone. Sandy appeared to be checking her messages. Maybe I'm just too suspicious. It was late, and Sandy had to get ready for a work trip. Her plane was leaving at 6:30 in the morning. I offered to take her to the airport, but she said the company car would pick them up. They were also supposed to be brought back upon return. Her return flight was for Sunday morning. I found this strange, but she explained that the audit would take half a day on Saturday, and the next available flight was only on Sunday. We got home around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Sandy said she wanted to lie on the deck and sunbathe. "Alex, make us a cocktail and join me on the terrace," she called. I went to the kitchen, and Sandy went up to the bedroom to change into her swimsuit. When she got down, she was wearing a spaghetti strap bikini. Her swimsuits were always more discreet than this one. She looked incredibly sexy, and noticing my gaze, she just smiled and went out onto the terrace. I hurried upstairs to change into shorts and headed to the terrace with our drinks. I couldn't wait to get a better look at her swimsuit. She was lying relaxed on a sun lounger when I served her a cocktail and sat down at the table. The swimsuit was a soft blue color, similar to silk. I said I liked her new swimsuit, and she said it was not for swimming, just for sunbathing. She turned over on her stomach and asked him to apply oil to her. I started from her shoulders and gradually worked my way down to her small waist. Then he moved to her ankles and calves, slowly moving up to her firm buttocks. I poured a generous amount of oil onto her thighs and began to rub it in. "How long have you been sunbathing in this swimsuit?" I asked. She replied, "I bought it 2 weeks ago and wore it only in our solarium." "Don't think I'll go to the beach looking like this." "Why not? You look great in it." "I have seen women who are completely unsuited to wearing such a bikini on the beach," I replied. She turned around, smiled at me, and said, "So if I want to go to the beach alone or with a friend, will you mind if I wear this?" "Well," I replied, "I'd like to be there to enjoy the view, but if you want to go with Barb or one of your friends, I don't think I'll mind." Sandy said, "If I wear this on the beach, all the perverts will follow me all day. I think I'll need a bodyguard." With these words, I went into the house to make us another drink. As I stood up, Sandy couldn't help but notice how turned on I was by her new bikini and the conversation about wearing it to the beach. In the evening, I went into the house, made another drink, and turned on the computer. Sandy was going to take a shower and then pack her suitcase. I started reading stories about women who go on business trips and what they do away from their husbands. In one story, a husband put sexy outfits in his wife's suitcase, hinting that she might have some fun. This turned me on incredibly, even though I didn't want Sandy to cheat on me. When I finished reading, Sandy was already in the bedroom, going through clothes in her closet. Her suitcase was on the stand, and I noticed that she had already packed 2 of her best work suits. Both were pants, a blouse, and a jacket. Sandy took a gray skirt and a white blouse from the closet. "I think I'll wear this tomorrow. Looks good with my black heels," she said. I watched her pack jeans, a couple of t-shirts, sandals, bras, underwear, and her favorite cotton pajamas. She then asked me to remind me to take my cosmetics and toiletries in the morning. I asked, "And you won't take anything if you suddenly want to go to a club or somewhere else?" She replied that she didn't think she would go out, but if I wanted to pick something for her, I could. I chose her sheer black top that she wore to the bar that night and a short black skirt from her closet. She laughed and said, "You don't want me to wear this skirt, do you? How about the white pants I wore with this top last time?" She put the skirt back and put the white trousers in the suitcase. I told her that if she wears white pants, she better wear a thong. Sandy laughed. "Oh, that's right. These are the same pants through which my panties were visible." She walked over to her dresser and pulled out a tiny white thong and put it in her suitcase. I asked if there was a swimming pool at the hotel where she would be staying. She replied that at work they said there was a pool. Then I asked if she thought about bringing a swimsuit in case she wanted to swim or sit in the jacuzzi. She took out her one-piece swimsuit and said, "This one is for swimming." She then pulled out one of her 2-piece bikinis and added, "And this one is for sunbathing or a jacuzzi. I'll go make another drink. Should I bring it for you?" I agreed, and she went to the kitchen. I found a new thong bikini in her drawer and discreetly put it in my suitcase. It was made of a soft, pink, silky fabric, similar to the blue one she tried on earlier. Closing my suitcase, I went downstairs. I decided to make myself another drink and went out onto the terrace. Sandy came out and said that she seemed to have everything packed, except for what she would need to take in the morning. It was already late, and we both went to bed, knowing that we would have to get up early. Sandy goes on a business trip. When I woke up in the morning, I noticed that Sandy had already gotten up and made coffee and breakfast. I started getting ready for work and went downstairs where Sandy was having breakfast in the kitchen. I put some scrambled eggs and sausages on my plate, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat down. After breakfast, I continued to get ready while watching Sandy get dressed. She was wearing a white push-up bra and white lace panties. She sat down on a chair in front of the dressing table and pulled thin nude stockings onto her slender legs. Then she put on a white blouse and a gray skirt. I went downstairs for a cup of coffee. As Sandy walked down the stairs, I couldn't help but notice how sexy she looked. The skirt ended just above the knees and looked very professional. Her blouse was quite sheer and her bra was slightly see-through. She put on a jacket on top. Around her ankle was a thin gold bracelet with a hot wife charm. A car drove into the entrance and honked its horn briefly. Sandy kissed me and told me she loved me. She took the case and rolled the suitcase out to the car. Sandy flew to Denver with her colleague Diana. At the airport, they were met by a company car, similar to the one that picked them up from home in the morning. The driver's name was Terry, and he helped them load their luggage into the trunk. He said he would take them to the hotel to check in and then pick them up in the afternoon at 12:30 to take them to the office. We checked into our rooms, and I started hanging out my clothes. The phone in the room rang, and I wondered who it could be. It was John. "Hi, Sandy. Hope you had a pleasant flight." "I wanted to make sure everything was okay," he said. "It's okay, John. I'll pick up Diana now, and we'll go have lunch until Terry comes back for us," I answered. "Okay, you and Diana will come into my office when you arrive, and I will help you get started. See you, Sandy," he said. Before I could get back to unpacking, there was a knock on the door. It was Diana. "They have a nice restaurant in the lobby," she said. "It suits me," I replied. Walking through the lobby, I noticed a lounge area next to the indoor pool. I think I'll definitely want a cocktail in the evening after work, I thought. We still had 30 minutes left after lunch, so Diana and I ordered coffee and talked about the company. We talked a few times in the office, but didn't know each other very well. Diana is an attractive 33-year-old woman with 3 children. Her husband is a doctor, and she says traveling for work doesn't bother her. She doesn't see her husband often anyway, and a nanny looks after the children. Soon Terry arrived, and the girls went to the office. Sandy and Diana arrived at headquarters and took the elevator to the top-floor penthouse. The secretary met them, greeted Diana, and said she was glad to see her again, and Sandy said it was nice to meet you. "John is waiting for you. Please sit down. He will be ready in a couple of minutes." John opened the door to his office and invited Sandy and Diana inside. Sandy was amazed at John's spacious and luxurious office. She didn't have a cubicle at home, but her office didn't even come close to that. "Let's sit down at the negotiating table. We're waiting for a couple more people. They'll be here soon," John said. He asked if they would like something to drink, and Diana asked for a cup of coffee. Sandy, feeling a little overwhelmed by the changes, asked for iced tea. John disappeared out the door and returned with the drinks. He winked at Sandy and told her that if she needed anything else, he had a fully equipped kitchen in his office behind the door. Sandy smiled at John and said, "You seem to be doing well since transferring here." "The company has been undergoing major changes since last week. We'll talk later," John replied. The intercom began to beep and John was told that Ralph and Tom had arrived. John asked the secretary to escort them to the conference table. A young, attractive secretary led the men to a table where they sat down. John introduced everyone. Ralph was the accounting manager and Tom was the senior accounting manager. Sandy was confused because she knew that John had been promoted to senior accounting manager at the Denver headquarters. John explained that Diana would work under Ralph and Sandy would help him with the final results. A few minutes later, everyone went to their workplaces, and I remained in John's office. He took my left hand and helped me get out of the chair. He led me into the main part of the office where his desk sat, as well as another desk and a computer across from and to the right of his desk. "This will be your workplace while you are here. The computer is connected to the network. You can access your mail and desktop from here," he said. I walked over to his desk, took the card from the holder, and read aloud. "John A. Manley, Vice President of Operations. Very impressive, Johnny. When will others find out this information?" John explained that the transfer took place on Monday and that when he was transferred, he himself did not know that the company was planning to replace the company's vice president with him. Sandy walked over to her desk and logged in. She wanted to check her mail and see if there were any rumors about John's appointment as vice president. John's secretary told him through the intercom that the CEO, Carlos Santadagio, was calling him. While I was checking my email, I looked at John, who was talking on the phone. I noticed that he was looking at me. His desk was positioned so that he could see my profile whenever he wanted. I turned the chair so I was facing him and crossed my legs. John smiled and ended the conversation. Well, Johnny, I'm afraid I'm going to have to tell you that I have a chain of emails here from good sources saying that you have been promoted to Vice President of Operations and the announcement will be made tomorrow. John noticed my black heels and ankle bracelet and admired the shape of my legs in nude stockings. When I sat down at the table, my skirt rode up a little, and he watched until I pulled the hem down as far as it would go on the chair. I turned back to the table and continued reading my mail. John continued to look at me. I took off my jacket, and he admired my translucent white blouse. It seemed to him that my small, elastic breasts were trying to break out of the white lace bra, which was visible through the fabric. He glanced at the wedding ring on my finger, which piqued his interest even more. John thought about how intensely the forbidden pleasure of being with a married woman felt, and he realized that Sandy would soon be in his bed. Sandy felt John's gaze on her, looked at him and smiled. She admired his success, but also his youth and good looks. She especially liked his large, muscular figure. She had wondered many times what it would be like to be with a man as big and physically strong as John. She understood that he was the reason she came to the headquarters in Denver. Sandy wondered if she could stop herself from cheating on her husband Alex in the coming days. She remembered their conversation that night. Maybe I should call him and ask if I could invite John over for a sleepover, flashed through her head. John caught her eye, and she quickly returned to her computer, trying not to smile. Sandy, why don't I entertain you tonight? I can show you Denver, or we can swim in my pool and grill something on the deck, he suggested. He added, it will be fun, and we can discuss how everyone is doing at home. Sandy asked, and you promise to act like a gentleman and treat me like a proper married lady. Sandy then added, no, I don't think you can, John. You've already told me such things that I'm sure all you want is to get into my panties. There was silence. John then responded, I really want to spend time with you. We've always gotten along, and I love being around you. And yes, you're right, I'm dying to get into your panties. Sandy told John that it would be best for her to return to the hotel after work. She added that after dinner she was going to go for a swim in the pool and have a couple of cocktails before going to bed early. John asked if he could take her back to the hotel. She replied, thank you, John. I think Diana will really like it. John said, you're just teasing me and you know it. Sandy responded, good things are worth waiting for, don't you agree? After work, John walked Diana and Sandy to the parking lot, where they climbed into his new Mustang GT. Sandy sat in the back seat so Diane could take the front seat. John thought it was just part of her game to play hard to get. When they arrived at the hotel, John dropped the women off and left. Sandy invited Diane to have a drink in the lounge, and she agreed. Over drinks, Sandy asked if Diana wanted to have dinner where they had lunch. Diana looked at Sandy and asked, can I trust you and be sure that you won't say anything at work? Sandy replied, you know me well enough to understand that I don't discuss people behind their backs. You can trust me if you want. Diana continued, you know, I love my husband and children, and I wouldn't survive if this became known to one of our friends. But I trust you, Sandy replied. Continue, Diana. If I can help you with anything, tell me. Diana smiled a sly smile and said, that's not the point. You see, I've been coming here to do audits for 5 years now, and during that time Ralph and I have developed a close relationship, if you know what I mean. I hope you don't mind, but I'll have a guest in my room tonight. Sandy assured Diana that her secret was safe and she would not bother her. Diana thanked her and added that Ralph would come pick her up in an hour to take her to dinner. She also asked if Sandy would mind having dinner alone. Sandy said it was no problem and wished Diana a good evening. After Diana left to change, Sandy ordered another drink. She couldn't believe that Diana was cheating on her husband with Ralph. Sandy had met Diane's husband, and thought he was much better than what she saw in Ralph. After finishing her drink, Sandy went to her room to change into her swimsuit. She was wondering whether to wear a one-piece swimsuit or a bikini when she noticed a satin pink thong bikini in her suitcase. Sandy was sure she didn't take it with her. Then she realized that Alex, her husband, must have put it in the suitcase. She thought, does he really want me to wear this to the pool? Alex is just kidding me. Sandy opted for her white one-piece swimsuit and high-heeled sandals. Assessing her appearance in the mirror, she said to herself, quite decent for a public pool. Walking out to the pool, she laid out a towel on the sun lounger. There was only a young couple with 2 children in the pool. Sandy sat on the edge of the pool and dipped her feet in the water to get used to its temperature. Then she entered the water and, having gotten used to the coolness, a little swam several laps. She decided to go to the bar and order a cocktail. The lounge was already crowded by this time, and Sandy felt the men's eyes on her, but did not pay attention to them. The bartender explained that the pool had just been filled and the water had not yet warmed up. Sandy took her drink and walked back to the pool, feeling eyes following her as she walked away. The young man at the bar couldn't take his eyes off Sandy. He hastily finished his beer and headed to his room to change clothes. A few minutes later, Sandy saw him leave his room and approach the pool. She noticed that his number was next to hers. The young man jumped into the water, swam a circle, and left the pool. He had a nice tan, a toned, muscular body, and his shorts were slightly see-through when wet. He walked over and took the lounge chair next to Sandy. The water is a bit cold today, he said. Sandy agreed, and the young man introduced himself. I'm Jack. It turned out that Jack was a local resident and was staying at the hotel while his apartment was being painted. He noticed the wedding ring on Sandy's finger and asked if she was there with her family. I'm here on a business trip for a couple of days, she explained. Jack thought he had a chance with this sexy woman who arrived alone. Can I buy you a drink? He suggested. Sandy smiled. Thanks, Jack. I'd love that. An hour and 2 cocktails later, Jack decided it was time to act. I noticed that your number is next to mine, he said. Sandy replied that she liked the pool access rooms. Initially, they wanted to put her on the 2nd floor, but she was able to change her room through the website before the trip. So you deliberately chose the room next to me? Jack teased. After a minute, he smiled and said he was just joking. Sandy decided to lighten the situation a little. That's right, I asked for a room next to the handsome young man by the pool. They both laughed. Sandy got up and jumped back into the water, and Jack followed. A few minutes later, he found himself next to her in the corner of the pool, 5 feet deep, where Sandy had to rest her hands on the edge to stay afloat. Jack approached, grabbed her around the waist, and pulled her close. Don't worry, Sandy, I'm holding you. Sandy put her hands on his shoulders. She felt his tense body press against her swimsuit as he lifted her legs and wrapped them around his hips. Jack, please stop, I'm married, Sandy said. But Jack didn't let go of her, grabbed her by the buttocks, and then with one hand reached lower, touching her private part and causing her excitement. She leaned over and kissed him, whispering in his ear, People are looking at us. Let me go to the room, and I'll come to you later. Sandy freed herself from his embrace. Jack smiled and let her go. She swam a few laps as if nothing had happened, and then she got out of the pool, wrapped a towel around her waist, and said, See you later, Jack. Returning to her room, Sandy felt confused. She didn't know what to do. If she doesn't go to Jack, how soon will he start knocking on her door? If she told him she changed her mind, would he let her go? In the pool, he seemed too insistent, and everything happened so quickly that she did not have time to react. Her mobile phone rang. It was Alex. How was your day? He asked, adding that he missed her. Sandy kept up the conversation, waiting for the right moment to tell him what had happened. Alex, I'm scared to be here alone, she said. What's happened? Is someone bothering you? He was clearly alarmed. Sandy told him everything that had happened since she arrived at the pool. She explained that she had to play along with this guy to get him to let her go. Alex asked if she thought he was dangerous or crazy. Sandy replied that he was probably just young, stupid, and crazy horny. Alex, after listening to the story, said, "Sandy, just put a do not disturb sign on the door. If he starts knocking, call the front desk and complain. Okay, I'll do that." "Everything will be okay," she replied. She said goodbye, saying that she was going to have dinner and go to bed early. Alex seemed to be a little drunk, but before saying goodbye, he admitted that he loved and missed her. Sandy changed from her swimsuit to her lingerie. She decided to wear the jeans, t-shirt, and bra she had worn before, as well as her black heels. She took the phone and called John. John answered happily. "Hi, Sandra. I was hoping you would call." Sandy told him about the guy by the pool and admitted that she was scared to be alone in the room. She added that if Diana were here, she would ask to stay with her. "You can come to me," John suggested. "I promise I won't bother you." "Will you pick me up, John?" Sandy asked. John replied that he would be there soon, and they agreed to meet in the lounge. Sandy decided to take her little blue thong bikini with her in her bag, although she wondered why she needed it. While she sat at the bar waiting for John, she returned to the room to put a more modest black bikini in her bag, but left the thong too. In the lounge, Sandy was slowly drinking her cocktail when the bartender who had served her earlier decided to try his hand at it. "I'll tell you something," Sandy said, "just because I like you. In a few minutes, a large and very muscular man will come here to pick me up. I don't think you should try anything." The bartender laughed. "Are you talking about Jack?" "Yes, he has already boasted to everyone here that he will end up in your bed today. Maybe tomorrow night you can give me a chance." The bartender didn't have time to finish speaking when John entered the lounge. He immediately walked towards Sandy with a big smile. Approaching, he put his hand on her shoulder and asked, "Is no one bothering you?" Sandy was extremely relieved to see him and said everything was fine. John sat down next to him, glanced at the bartender, and ordered 2 of the same cocktails that Sandy drank. She slightly bowed her head on his massive shoulder and said quietly, "Thank you for coming to save me." After they finished their drinks, they walked out to John's car and headed towards his house. On the way, John stopped at a pizza place and said he had ordered a large combination pizza to go, asking if that would be okay. Sandy replied that pizza was great. A minute later, John came out with the order, and 10 minutes later, they were already at his house. John suggested sitting on the terrace, and Sandy agreed, saying it was a good idea. Looking around, Sandy was amazed by John's house. "This place looks very expensive, John," she said. "For now, I'm just renting it, but I have the opportunity to buy it at any time during the lease term," he answered. "The bar is right behind the sliding doors if you want to make yourself a drink," he suggested. John went to the large refrigerator by the pool, took out a beer, and said, "I have beer and wine cocktails here. Would you like anything?" Sandy looked into the refrigerator and grabbed a wine cocktail. "This is what you need, and the pizza smells so good," Sandy said. They sat at a table on the terrace, enjoying the breeze, pizza, and drinks. After a while, Sandy asked if she could tour the house, and John said she could feel at home. "You go through the bar. The door on the left is the guest bedroom with a bathroom. She's yours while you're here," he added. Sandy looked around the house and found the master bedroom on the second floor. She thought, "This room is bigger than my entire first floor." She never imagined that John was so well off. She then went downstairs and looked into the guest bedroom and was amazed by its size and design. The bathroom was huge, with a separate shower and a large jacuzzi. Sandy put her things on the bed and returned to the terrace. "This place is amazing," she told John. "Not as amazing as you, Sandy," he replied. After a short pause, he added, "Sandy, I told you I wouldn't bother you. Use the house as if it were your own. I'm going to go for a swim and then maybe sit in the jacuzzi before I go to bed." John went inside to change into his swimming trunks, and Sandy grabbed another wine cocktail and sat down at the table on the terrace. A few minutes later, John came out onto the terrace. Sandy noticed his powerful chest, muscular arms, and long, well-developed legs. His stomach was flat, with defined abdominal muscles. He was wearing bright yellow swim trunks that reached mid-thigh and hugged his strong legs. Sandy's breath caught in her throat as she watched John approach the pool. The sexiest ass I've ever seen, she thought. John jumped into the splash pool and Sandy returned to the house to change into her black bikini. A few minutes later, she came out and jumped into the pool. She swam up to John and hugged his neck. "I think I want to be bothered," she said. She moved her lips to his. John looked into her big brown eyes and realized that this would be the night they would share. He placed his large hands on her side and pulled her closer, kissing her for the first time. Sandy felt her body tremble, and they broke the kiss. They splashed around in the pool for a few minutes. Then Sandy walked out to return to her drink on the table. The water was wonderful, but the night air outside was chilly. John walked up behind her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Are you cold?" he asked. John took the lid off the jacuzzi and turned it on. The water began to glow thanks to the illumination, and the streams began to bubble. Sandy and John got into the hot tub, and Sandy noticed John's swim trunks swelling from the pressure of the water. They both laughed, and John said that when he is alone, he sits in the jacuzzi naked. Sandy mentioned the blue thong her husband accidentally put in her suitcase and said, "I almost had the courage to wear it when I was swimming in the pool." John replied, "You look sexy in anything, but I think I missed a lot by not seeing you in a thong." Sandy asked, "Do you want to see?" Sandy got out of the jacuzzi, wrapped herself in a towel, and headed into the house. She wore a thin silk pink thong and bikini top. Then she put on her black high-heeled shoes and looked at herself in the mirror. Wrapping the towel around her waist, she returned to the terrace. Sandy walked over to the hot tub, holding a towel, her wedding ring glinting in the light from the water's backlight. "Ready?" she asked, throwing off the towel. John looked at her carefully, his gaze sliding from her small, firm breasts to the thin strip of fabric that disappeared into the folds of her body. Sandy got into the jacuzzi and said, "Well, John, now it's your turn." John laughed. "It's not fair. I don't have a thong to change into." Sandy smiled slyly. "You said to yourself that you like to sit in a jacuzzi naked. So shoot." They both laughed, and John asked, "Do you seriously want me to take them off?" Sandy replied, laughing, "What, are you embarrassed? Take off your shorts. Let's see what you've got." John stood up from the jacuzzi and said, "Okay, I'll take them off." Sandy carefully watched his every move. Her gaze became serious, but a slight smile played on her lips. John slowly lowered his swim trunks to his hips and looked at her again, as if waiting for her reaction. He then removed them completely and returned to the water, standing directly in front of her before sitting down next to her. "Oh my God, John," Sandy said, amazed. "You are definitely gifted." John blushed slightly, but smiled. "How much bigger can it get?" she asked. John shrugged. "I've never thought about it, but I think it's about 23 centimeters. Sandy moved closer to him, and they started kissing again. She ran her hand over his broad chest, down to his stomach, and John placed his hand on her thigh. Sandy leaned over to John and whispered, "Let's go to your bedroom, Johnny," she said, looking into his eyes. They got out of the jacuzzi, wrapped themselves in towels, and headed inside. John took Sandy's left hand, her ring glinting in the light as he led her towards the stairs. After walking up 3 steps, Sandy stopped, turned around, and threw her arms around his neck. John picked her up, and she wrapped her legs around his waist. Their kisses became hot and passionate. When they entered the bedroom, John carefully sat down on the bed, holding Sandy on his lap. He reached over and undid the knot of her pink satin top. Her gaze slid to his torso, and she smiled softly, feeling him close. John lay on his back, and Sandy, a little worried, gently touched his hand. "I want to know how special you are, John." "You're so unusual," she whispered, her voice sounding gentle and a little embarrassed. John asked with a smile, "What did Alex say?" Sandy thought for a moment before answering. "He was always quite modest. But with you, everything is different." She smiled, feeling a little admiration. Under her gentle touches, John began to relax, feeling the warmth of her hands. Sandy couldn't help but notice his confidence and calmness. "You are amazing, John," she whispered, feeling her heart beat faster from these moments of intimacy. Her fingers gently touched his hand, and their gaze crossed, filling this moment with tenderness and mutual understanding. Sandy felt comfortable and safe with him, and they both enjoyed the moment, giving in to simple feelings that did not need words. John told her it was incredible. "I have dreamed of you since our first meeting. I want to enjoy this moment," he said. Sandy leaned closer, their eyes met, and for a moment there was tension between them. "John, I want you to know that I have never been with another man other than my husband, and I did not plan to." John replied with a smile, "You're too special to go unnoticed, Sandy. I think Alex understands that too." He carefully picked Sandy up and laid her on the bed. She felt his hands carefully run along her back. The tenderness of his touch made her freeze. John pressed himself against her skin, feeling her warmth, and they exchanged soft kisses. Sandy closed her eyes, enjoying the moment of intimacy. "Are you ready for this, Sandy?" John asked, his voice sounding muffled. She took a deep breath and nodded, trusting her feelings and letting things unfold naturally. There were no words between them, only sincere emotions and the desire to be close to each other, sharing this moment. Time seemed to stand still, and all that mattered was the feelings they were experiencing at that moment. John hugged Sandy, making her feel safe and calm. John knew it was too late to turn back. He had walked most of the way. All the difficulties and obstacles he had to overcome to get to this point made his determination even stronger. He knew that every moment was important now, and every connection they had was of great importance. He moved carefully, feeling close and united with Sandy, delving deeper into their unique connection. He felt her warmth, her breathing, and heard her pulse quicken. These small details created a feeling of complete fusion, as if their souls had found a common rhythm. Sandy responded to his touch, her arms wrapped around him, her fingers gently touching his shoulders. She felt John's every movement, their general harmony, and the thrill that filled their hearts. John tried to be careful, listen to her reactions, and be attentive to her every movement and sound. He saw trust and warmth in her eyes, and this made him be even more careful and loving. He pressed her to him, hugged her tightly, enjoying every moment spent next to her. Their movements were smooth and coordinated, as if they had long known how to find this common rhythm. As their breathing became more even, John looked at Sandy, her eyes full of light and joy. She smiled at him, and he answered her with the same gentle and sincere smile. At this moment, all words seemed superfluous. Their looks said more than could be expressed in words. Sandy's warm, soft smile reflected her inner state full of happiness and satisfaction that she felt when she was next to him. "You know, I want to be by your side always," she whispered, pressing herself against his chest. Her voice was quiet, as if she was afraid to ruin this moment. John felt his heart speed up as he heard those words. He hugged her tighter, wanting her to feel completely safe. "Me too," he said, looking at her tenderly. At that moment, he understood that everything they went through was worth these moments, this feeling of unity, when two hearts beat in unison. Their closeness was not only physical, but also spiritual. They could lie like this for hours, enjoying this moment and each other's warmth. Sandy turned on her side, still hugging John. He looked at her face, soft and relaxed, with closed eyes and a happy smile. She looked so peaceful that John couldn't take his eyes off her. He admired her calmness, her beauty, the way her hair fell softly onto the pillow. For both of them, this moment became special and important. It was more than just physical intimacy. It was a real connection between two souls who found each other in a vast world. Sandy clung to him even tighter, feeling his warmth, his strength, and care that he showed to her. John continued to stroke her back, listening to her quiet, calm breathing. And they lay there together, enjoying the moment, feeling that with each other they could overcome any difficulties. Their connection only became stronger, and the time spent together was the most precious thing they could give each other. As they cuddled on John's bed, tears streamed down her face and onto John's stomach. John looked at Sandy and asked, "Why are you crying? I thought you enjoyed the sex. Did I hurt you?" Sandy was silent for a moment and then said to John, "It's like I lost my virginity again, cheated on my husband. I never thought I could do this to him." John held her for a few minutes and then said, "I'm sorry, Sandy. I didn't know you'd never been with another man. I always thought you were just pretending to get favors. That night at the bar you looked so hot. I saw you weren't wearing a bra and how horny Alex was because of that. I noticed the chain on your hot wife's ankle and thought your husband was letting you have sex with other men." Sandy looked John in the eyes and asked, "What makes you think Alex would want me to have sex with other men?" John responded, "Sandy, that's what the term hot wife means. The fact that a husband allows his wife to dress sexy and seduce other men, don't you know that? Where did you get the chain from? What do you think it means?" Sandy told John that Barb gave it to her because she didn't want it. Barb's divorced sister lived with her for a couple of months and left her when she moved away. Sandy said, "Barb thought it just meant a woman was sexy but also married, like a wedding ring saying she was already taken. John, I would never have worn this to work today if I knew it meant I was sleeping next to you. My God, Alex saw me wearing this. What must he think of me? He mustn't know what it means either, otherwise he would never have let me wear it." John stroked Sandy's soft, silky hair and said, "It's okay, Sandy. Most married men probably have no idea about hot wives. The only reason I know about it is because I have a soft spot for married women. If you look it up on the internet, you will see a lot of married couples living the hot wife lifestyle." They talked for some more time and soon both fell asleep. Sandy began to fantasize about herself as a slutty wife. She would dress up, flirt, and go out with other men while telling her husband not to wait. Sandy's hand went to John's stomach, and she felt him begin to move. She felt hot after sleep when she felt John's closeness. John turned to face Sandy, snuggling closer to her. Sandy turned on her side, moving closer to John. He hugged her, and they pressed close to each other. There was tension between them, which they shared, enjoying the moment of intimacy. John stroked her gently, feeling the warmth of her body, and Sandy relaxed, trusting his touch. Their hugs were full of tenderness and affection, creating a feeling of comfort and calm. When Sandy woke up in the morning, John was in the shower. Sandy went down to the guest bedroom and got dressed. She stayed at John's house for the rest of the week, enjoying their time together. She stayed at the hotel Saturday night and shared stories with Diane. She asked Diana if she knew that she was a hot wife, and Diana replied that she had heard about it. She told Sandy that she was not a good wife because her husband would never accept it. Diana told Sandy, "What he doesn't know won't hurt him." On Sunday morning, Diane and Sandy went to the airport and flew home. Sandy returns from a trip. The car with Sandy pulled up to the house around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Alex hurried over to help her with her suitcase. Sandy stepped out of the car in one of her business suits, holding her jacket over her arm. She handed the jacket to Alex as he pulled out the handle of her suitcase. "Can you take this? It was too hot to wear on the plane," she said. Sandy reached into the back seat for her briefcase and purse. Slamming the car door, she waved to the driver, who immediately drove off. Alex was dressed as he usually was on Sundays: shorts, sandals, and a bright short-sleeved shirt. He carried Sandy's things into the house and then returned to the deck, where he left a large glass of bourbon and Coke. On the table on the terrace was a portable TV, on which Alex watched baseball. Sandy went up to the bedroom to change clothes. A few minutes later, she came out onto the terrace in a light summer dress that reached her knees. She made herself a margarita and sat down on one of the chairs on the terrace. "You seem to be enjoying the carefree single life while I was away," Sandy said. "Nothing like that," Alex answered. "I was doing chores, doing laundry, washing dishes, and we had salmon marinating in the refrigerator. Everything is ready for the evening, and all you have to do is relax and look attractive. Daddy took care of everything." Sandy took a sip of her cocktail, wondering how to talk about John, if she should tell anything at all. She was very excited about the thought of becoming a hot wife, but she wasn't sure how Alex would react to it. Sex with John was a new and exciting experience for her, similar to the excitement of kissing a new lover for the first time. It made her feel young and free, and she didn't want to lose that feeling. "I'll take Monday off to rest after the audit," Sandy said. "I wish I could take the day off with you, but I have an important project, and there's a lot of pressure right now to finish it on time," Alex replied. Sandy walked into the house and opened her laptop. She wanted to read some hot wives' advice blogs she found online. Some of them seemed too outlandish to her, while others seemed quite real. She read the blog of a woman who wrote that she first realized that her husband was open to the idea of her having relationships with other men when they were in bed. The woman said she mentioned how someone became interested in her, and her husband became increasingly agitated as she added details. Sandy thought it was somewhat reminiscent of Alex's reaction when they talked in bed about how men looked at her or made advances at her. Meanwhile, Alex was preparing the grill while Sandy went out into the front yard to water her plants. She noticed their neighbor Steve washing his car in the driveway across the street. His wife, Linda, was apparently at work or shopping. Steve's wife, Linda, runs a large department store and is often away from home. Sandy waved to Steve, and he smiled and waved back. She pulled the garden hose out into the front yard to her rock garden with flowers along the sidewalk and began spraying the plants. A minute later, she noticed that the curtains on the large living room windows of Steve's house had opened. The sun was behind Sandy and shining directly into the living room through the huge windows. Then she saw Steve enter the living room. He acted as if he had no idea that she could see him. Sandy watched as he slowly unbuttoned his shirt and took it off before squeezing his groin through his shorts. She had previously noticed how he walked around the house in his underwear with the curtains open, but she had never given it any importance. "So he likes to put on a show. I wonder how far he'll go with a little encouragement," Sandy whispered to herself. She adjusted the water on the hose to a fine mist, lifted her dress to mid-thigh, and rinsed her legs. Her tanned legs glistened from the water. Through her sunglasses, she noticed Steve unbutton his shorts, revealing his white briefs. Sandy put the hose away and returned to the backyard, where Alex was removing the salmon from the grill. After dinner, Sandy sat back down at her laptop, while Alex continued watching baseball. When the game ended, he turned off the TV and asked, "Are you going to bed? I need to get up early and go to the office. Anyway, I'm going to bed. I'll see you when you get there." "I'll take a shower and then join you," Sandy replied. She turned off the computer and went upstairs. Taking a large towel from the closet, she adjusted the temperature of the shower water. She unbuttoned her dress, which fell to the floor. Sandy looked into the large mirror, wondering what kind of impression she was making on men. Then she turned her back, looked at her small but round buttocks, and ran her hands over them. Smooth as a baby's skin, she thought. Sandy got into the shower and shaved her legs. When she finished showering, she walked out into the bedroom wearing a short white robe. Sandy put on some cotton panties and a t-shirt before getting into bed. She snuggled up to Alex and kissed his shoulder. "Did you miss your baby? It's so nice to be back in my bed," she said. Sandy ran her hand over his chest, stomach, and slid down. "I'm glad you're home, Sandy." "I really missed you," he said, turning to her and kissing her on the lips. "Remember that guy by the pool I told you about? The one who pestered me? I can't believe the nerve of him," Sandy said. She left her hand on his shorts, trying to detect even the slightest arousal. "Didn't you say that he moved out the next morning and you didn't have any more problems with him?" "Putting up a do not disturb sign was the best decision," Alex replied. Sandy still didn't notice any excitement from her husband, so she continued. "Well, I didn't tell you the details of what he did to me in the pool. Like I said, at first he seemed like just a nice guy who wanted to talk. Then he started buying me drinks, and after a couple of margaritas, I thought I could get rid of him by going for a swim. But he followed me into the pool, and pushed me into a corner where my feet could no longer reach the bottom, and he got so close that I couldn't stay on the water. After a short pause, she continued, I had no choice but to put my hands on his shoulders to stay afloat. What happened next? Did you say he tried to kiss you? Alex asked in an uneven voice. Sandy still didn't notice a strong enough reaction, so she continued. I didn't tell you everything because I didn't want you to worry while I was away. Alex put his hand on her thigh and said, It's okay, dear. Tell me what happened. I'll handle it. Sandy decided to say more and continued. He wrapped his arms around me so that I couldn't escape and pressed me to him. Then he started kissing me on the lips. I was so scared, everything happened so quickly, that I was just trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. She paused for a moment and then continued. The next second, I felt his tongue in my mouth and his hand on my butt. I tried to push him away, but he was too strong. And then I felt his hand between my legs. He began to touch me there. Sandy felt Alex become more excited as she told her story. Alex was angry that someone was trying to humiliate his sweet wife, but at the same time he couldn't help but feel aroused at the thought of another man touching her. And what did you do then? You got out of there, returned to your room, and called me, Alex said. Sandy noticed that Alex was starting to lose his excitement again and continued. Then I decided that the only way to get out was to pretend that I liked it. I raised my legs and wrapped them around his waist so that he could feel me better and began to respond to his kisses. Then I told him that we shouldn't do this in a public place and that I would meet him later in his room. It worked, and he let me go. That's when I returned to my room and called you. Sandy smiled, noticing how her story created a strong attraction in Alex. She came closer to him, and Alex easily got rid of her clothes. However, Sandy did not want to rush and preferred to start with gentle touches, creating an atmosphere of trust and intimacy between them. She hugged him softly and caringly, and Alex soon felt all his tension go away. Sandy tried to make the moment special and intimate to create fond memories for both of them. Everything happened naturally, and in the end, they just lay next to each other, enjoying warm hugs and tender kisses. Sandy knew it would take time and patience to strengthen their relationship. She sought to create a deep connection between them, and Alex seemed to appreciate this, responding to her care and affection with love and tenderness. I'm so sorry that I let this happen, but I didn't know any other way out of the situation, she said. Alex hugged her tightly and assured her that she had nothing to be ashamed of. The main thing is that you got out of this unpleasant situation before he could go further. It's a shame I wasn't there to protect you, he said. A few minutes later, Alex fell asleep, and Sandy wondered how he had reacted to her story about the stranger. The next morning, Sandy woke up before Alex, so she went down to the kitchen, made coffee, and prepared breakfast for her beloved husband. After Alex left for the office, Sandy decided what she could do alone at home all day. She walked over to the large floor-to-ceiling window and opened the curtains to let the morning light flood into the living room. She looked across the street and saw that her neighbors, Steve and Linda, were both home. I think I better go upstairs and take a shower and then see what to wear, she said to herself. Sandy took a relaxing shower, blow-dried her hair, and then sat in front of her vanity and began applying body lotion to her shoulders, arms, and legs. Standing in front of a full-length mirror, she applied the lotion to her chest, stomach, and buttocks. Feeling soft and smooth, Sandy decided to find clothes that matched how she felt. She opened her dresser drawer and selected one of her sexiest white sheer push-up bras and matching white sheer bikini panties. She put them on and looked at herself in the mirror. She then pulled out a pair of black high heels that she rarely wore because they became uncomfortable after a short time. Sandy looked at herself in the mirror again, turning to see what she looked like from behind. Looks pretty hot. Maybe I should go outside like that, she said. Sandy walked to the bedroom window and looked outside. Linda was just leaving the yard, but Steve's car was still there. Steve sometimes had to travel for work, so he would either go away for weeks at a time or stay home for a week or two. Sandy remembered reading that dating a married man was relatively safe because they were less likely to get sexually transmitted diseases and less likely to fall in love or be stalked. She noticed that the curtains of the house opposite were still closed. Sandy then opened her closet and found a white, sheer, long-sleeved blouse. She put it on, and it hung down just enough to cover her panties, leaving her tanned legs on show. She buttoned her blouse, leaving the top 3 buttons undone to show off her cleavage. Sandy went down to the living room and stood in front of the wide-open window, looking across the street. A few minutes earlier, Steve had looked out the window and noticed Sandy's car in the driveway and the open curtains in her living room. Sandy saw the curtains across the street open and spotted Steve pretending to look out into his yard, but she knew she was his main attraction. Sandy closed the curtains slightly, leaving a gap so she could see what was happening outside. Now Steve couldn't see that she was watching him. Steve waited for her to open the curtains again, but they remained closed. He had the feeling that she wanted to look at him, but did not want to give him the satisfaction of showing that she was looking. Steve decided that if she wanted to play, he was ready. He closed his curtains, thinking, two can play this game. Steve had lived across the street from Sandy and Alex for 6 years and had always dreamed of getting Sandy into bed. Now he thought that with Sandy home alone all day, he might have a chance. She looked damn hot at the window this morning. Looks like she needs a good man, he muttered. As soon as he saw Sandy open the curtains halfway again, Steve did the same, but did not stand directly in front of the window. Instead, he walked past the window several times so she could just catch glimpses of him in his sexy shorts. Sandy understood where this game was going and decided to continue. So he thinks a bored housewife wants to look at him, but I won't give him that pleasure without a little show. Okay, let's see, she said. Sandy opened the curtains wide and stood in front of the window again. Steve also opened his curtains and now stood opposite, right in plain sight. Sandy stepped away from the window and sat down on the couch opposite, so Steve could see her. Steve stepped back from his window so Sandy could no longer see him since his house was in the shadows. The sun was shining directly through Sandy's window, and she was visible from anywhere in her living room. Sandy stood up again and walked to the window, waiting to see what her neighbor would do next. Steve was delighted that Sandy decided to play along with him. He stood right in front of the window, stretched slightly, then turned around, as if demonstrating his confidence and good mood. Sandy watched him with a smile, knowing that he was trying to impress her. Steve slowly unzipped his shorts and took off his tank top as he continued to put on a little show for her. He looked relaxed and a little playful, which made him especially attractive. Sandy, still smiling, decided to play along and slowly began to unbutton the buttons of her blouse. However, she was not going to go any further. She left her blouse open just enough to tease a little. Steve noticed this and realized that she was also involved in this game, but was not going to go too far. Steve responded by pulling down his shorts, leaving him in his white beach briefs, and stood up, looking at Sandy defiantly. He waited for her to continue, but instead Sandy crossed her arms and tapped the toe of her shoe on the floor. She seemed to let him know that she expected something more from him, but was ready to stop here. Steve sensed that she had decided to take the initiative, and, not wanting to lose face, he took another step to show his confidence. However, instead of giving in to his mood, Sandy suddenly reached for the curtains and closed them. Sandy walked upstairs to her bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, pulling out a pair of white shorts. She pulled them on, tucking in her blouse and buttoning her shorts. Sandy looked at herself in the mirror and decided that the blouse looked too dressy. She unclasped it and took it off, then unclasped the front of her bra, letting it slide off her shoulders and arms before putting it back in her dresser. Sandy found a white halter-neck top in her drawer and put it on, tying it at the back. She liked to wear white because it highlighted her dark bronze tan. She took a pair of high-heeled sandals from the closet and put them on. Looking at herself in the mirror, she smiled approvingly. Sexy but innocent, she thought. Sandy returned to the living room, went into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of orange juice, then went out onto the terrace. She opened an umbrella over a table on the terrace and sat cross-legged, looking out at the neighboring yards. Sandy's phone began to vibrate. She looked at the caller's name and answered. "Hello, John. Are you already bored?" John replied, "Of course, I miss you. I can't wait to see you again. Sandy, if you ever want to spend the weekend away, just let me know. I can save you the hassle of finding a motel when you come to Denver." Sandy laughed and said, "Okay, is this offer valid if I bring my husband with me?" John replied, "You know it's open to him too. I'm sure we can find some time alone. We can arrange for Alex to play golf while you and I do something more interesting," he said, laughing. "Great, then I look forward to our vacation in the near future," she replied. Sandy began to remember how much fun she had with John when she was in Denver. John said, "By the way, you will see me on Thursday. I will come to your area on business. We will have a meeting to discuss some changes in the company. I was also hoping that you could accompany me to the company dinner on Friday night. Do you think Alex won't mind?" "I think he'll agree. Alex always understands when it comes to work." "Looking forward to meeting you, John. It's a shame you're not here right now," she replied. After finishing her conversation with John, Sandy sighed heavily and remembered how good the sex with him was. She felt heat between her legs, remembering the first time he took off his shorts and climbed into the jacuzzi with her. Lost in thoughts about her relationship with John, Sandy heard someone enter her backyard. It was Steve, wearing short cut-off jeans and a white sleeveless tank top. Steve walked over to the table on the terrace, sat down on a chair next to Sandy and said, "It's a beautiful morning, isn't it, Sandy? Do you mind if I keep you company?" Sandy was silent for a moment, contemplating how to handle the awkward situation. An hour ago, she saw the show that Steve put on in front of the window of his house, undressing. She thought, "Wow, he's so arrogant. He thinks he's impressed me with his little performance." "Sandy, I just wanted to apologize for getting a little carried away this morning. It's just that when I saw you in the window, standing in just a white blouse and black heels, I couldn't help myself," Steve said. When Sandy didn't react, he continued, "Actually, I think you liked looking at me. You didn't turn away and close the curtains until you saw everything you wanted." Sandy replied, "Do you know what I think, Steve? I think you are a voyeur and exhibitionist. I saw you try to show yourself to me yesterday while I was watering the plants. And this isn't the first time you've walked around in front of a window almost naked. It's funny how you always choose a time when I'm home alone or when Alex can't see you," she added. Steve chuckled a little nervously and replied, "And you yourself are not so innocent. Yesterday your dress was almost transparent in the sun. I saw your legs all the way up through the fabric." Sandy replied, "I had no idea that my dress was so see-through in the sun, but I definitely noticed that you liked it." Steve felt that he had an opportunity and smiled and said, "I've been watching you for a long time, beauty. You always look amazing. By the way, you have excellent taste in clothes." Steve pulled his chair closer to Sandy, turning it slightly so he was looking directly at her. He placed his right hand on her knee and said, "When I saw you unbutton your blouse this morning, I thought, this is it. She's finally going to show me her gorgeous body." Sandy replied, "I don't know where you're trying to go with this, Steve. I like you as a friend and neighbor, but I have no intention of having an affair with you. I'm sorry if I gave you false hope this morning, but, you started this spying game." Sandy grabbed his wrist, trying to remove his hand from her knee. But being much stronger than her, Steve easily moved his hand higher to her thigh and could have gone further if he wanted. "Do you have a cup of coffee for your friendly neighbor? I could really use it right now," he said. Sandy stood up and answered, "Wait a minute, Steve, I'll get you some coffee." She walked through the sliding door to the terrace and entered the kitchen. As she began to pour the coffee, she heard the door open and saw Steve enter the house. Sandy started to get angry and said in a stern voice, "Steve, I asked you to wait outside on the terrace. I didn't invite you to the house." We can continue our conversation outside. I think we'd better talk here, he replied. After all, we don't want our neighbors to see us and misunderstand the situation. Steve took a cup of coffee and walked into the living room. He sat down on the sofa and put the cup on the table. Sandy followed him and sat down at the card table, which was a safe distance from the couch. Okay, Steve, let's talk here, Sandy said, choosing her words carefully. You like the way I look. This morning you were hoping that I would give you a show. I admit I was just teasing you a little. I was wondering how quickly you would start the show yourself. Steve replied, I'm just an ordinary man, Sandy, and when a woman like you lives opposite, it's hard to resist. You excite me, Sandy replied. But you're Alex's friend, Steve. How can you come here and harass your friend's wife? Steve didn't answer, just smiled. His gaze slowly slid over her body from her face to her legs and back. Sandy stood up, spread her arms out to the sides, and slowly turned around, giving Steve the opportunity to look at her from all sides. Is this what you want, Steve? Do you like looking at me? What else do you want from me? Steve stood up and said, I want you to take off this top and then your shorts. I think I deserve to see all of you. Sandy felt tears welling up in her eyes. She felt trapped. The only time she was in such an overwhelming situation was at the hotel when Jack cornered her in the pool and started touching her. Then she managed to get out by playing along with him. Now she wondered if this approach would help again. Steve interrupted her thoughts. Stop crying, Sandy. I just want you to give me a little show like I did for you this morning. Sandy replied, I'm scared, Steve. Why don't you just go home? I promise I'll give you a show by the window. Give me some time to collect my thoughts. What are you afraid of, Sandy? This will remain only between us. I won't tell anyone, not Alex or anyone else. I want the show to start right now. Take off that top. Sandy cried. I'm scared, Steve. If I take off my clothes, you will offend me. Steve came closer and stood in front of her. Sandy's head barely reached his chest. Should I help you undress? He asked, looking down. Sandy pleaded with a trembling voice. No, Steve, please go away. I promise that I will undress in front of the window for you. Take off your top right now. Take it off. Otherwise, I'll take it off myself, he shouted. Tears streamed down Sandy's face as she reached behind her and untied the top ties of her top. Slowly, very slowly. I want to enjoy every moment of watching you naked in front of me, Steve said in a calm voice. Sandy turned her back to him and untied the bottom ties. She then turned back to face Steve and slowly lowered her top, exposing her breasts. Steve raised his hand and motioned for it to slowly turn on its axis so that he could look at it from all sides. Oh yeah, Sandy, that's it. Look at those small breasts, he mused. She could see the lust in Steve's eyes as they swept over every part of her body. Instinctively, she raised her hands and covered her chest. I just like tank tops, but you can't wear a bra under one, he said. Now pull your shorts down carefully and slowly. Sandy, you're fine. Then please go away, Sandy asked. Just do it, and stop crying. I want you to look beautiful as always. Smile at me while you're getting out of these pants. Here is a rewritten version, toned down and without explicit scenes. Sandy stood in her room, trying to cope with the awkwardness of the situation. She nervously undid the button on her shorts, trying to smile at her neighbor Steve. After a moment of confusion, she slowly turned her back to him, trying to hold her breath and not show her fear. Steve watched her every move carefully. Sandy returned to face him and slowly slid her shorts down her legs until they touched the floor. She stepped out of them and turned back to Steve, still feeling awkward. She looked into his eyes, hoping that he would say that this was enough. Suddenly, however, Steve picked her up as if he was going to carry her over the threshold. Please, Steve, put me down, she asked, hoping to avoid the situation from escalating further. Steve, however, decided to walk up the steps to the bedroom with her. He looked at Sandy and said, I've always wanted to be here in your bedroom. I sometimes saw you changing clothes through the window, and now I want to get to know you better." As Steve lifted Sandy up to her bedroom, she looked at him with excitement and worry. "Please, Steve, you said we were friends," she whispered. Sandy tried to free herself, but Steve continued to carry her, careful to make sure she didn't fall. When they entered the bedroom, Steve carefully placed Sandy on the bed and took a few steps away, keeping his distance. He tried to find the right words to explain his feelings. He still felt awkward, but he wanted Sandy to know that he cared about her. "Sandy, I know we're friends, and I don't want you to be afraid of me," Steve said, trying to remain calm. "I just think I started to feel something more for you, and I didn't know how to talk about it." Sandy looked at him, her fear gradually giving way to bewilderment. She sat up in bed and took a deep breath. "Steve, I care about you, but you have to understand that these things are not done like this," she said calmly. Steve bowed his head, realizing his mistake. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I was just confused about my feelings and didn't know what to do." Sandy smiled at him, understanding what he was experiencing. "Let's remain friends, and if there are any feelings between us, we will deal with it differently, without haste and fear." Steve nodded and sat down next to him, keeping a safe distance. They continued the conversation, trying to understand each other, and the tension gradually subsided. Both knew that the most important thing was respect for each other and the ability to talk about their feelings openly, without coercion. He gently grabbed Sandy's ankles and pulled her closer as she lay on the bed. Sandy was now next to Steve, feeling his warmth and closeness. Steve and Sandy exchanged tender glances, and she realized that they had a special connection. Steve carefully pulled her towards him, trying to create an atmosphere of trust and mutual understanding. He smiled and said, "You are amazing, Sandy, and I love being around you." Sandy felt a lightness that allowed her to relax. She understood that Steve respected her boundaries and wanted her to feel comfortable. Steve invited her to sit next to her, and they continued the conversation, enjoying a moment of intimacy that did not require unnecessary words or actions. Their communication became more and more deep, and Sandy felt that she could trust Steve, knowing that he cared about her comfort and well-being. Sandy slowly raised her knees and carefully lifted her hips, removing her underwear. By the time she lowered it to her knees, tears began to roll down her cheeks. "Turn over, Sandy. I want to look at you," Steve said, moving the laundry off her legs. Sandy, following his words, rolled over onto her stomach, feeling Steve's hands gently touching her back and thighs. He then gently spread her legs, placing his hand on her thigh. "You are beautiful," he said quietly. Sandy felt the tension building and tried to find a way to stop it. "Please, Steve, let's just talk about this. I'm not ready now, maybe later, in a different setting," she whispered, hoping for his understanding. "No, Sandy, I'm not going to stop now," Steve insisted. He found himself next to her, his heavy breathing very close, and his hands continued to touch her shoulders and arms. Sandy tried not to show fear, although everything inside screamed that the situation was getting out of control. She tried to make it as clear as possible that she did not want to continue, but Steve seemed to ignore her words, plunging into his own desires. Sandy felt trapped, hoping that she would find a way to stop what was happening, and tried to remain calm despite the vulnerability of the situation. "Of course, I can help adapt this fragment so as to remove explicit elements and leave only a neutral narrative. Here's how to change the text." Now Sandy allowed her thoughts to relax, realizing that the inevitable was about to happen. Steve gently ran his finger over her stomach, his gaze full of surprise and tenderness. Sandy reached out to touch Steve, her touch timid and confident at the same time, as if she was trying to feel every second of this moment. Steve smiled and said, "You really want this, right?" His voice was quiet and calm. He began to kiss her lips again, and this time Sandy opened her mouth and allowed him to explore her tenderly. Steve paid attention to her light touches, gently touching her shoulders and arms. He admired her every movement. He began to kiss her neck, taking a comfortable position next to her. Sandy wrapped her arms around his back, allowing herself to feel all the warmth and tenderness of this moment. Their touches were slow and gentle. Every movement seemed filled with meaning and intimacy. Steve felt in awe as their mutual intimacy deepened and a sense of connection filled him. He was patient and attentive, listening to her every breath and reacting to her movements. Sandy hugged him tightly, their breaths intertwined, and for a moment time seemed to stop, allowing them to be completely immersed in this moment. Their mutual closeness was not just physical, it was an emotional connection that became stronger. After all, Steve rolled over onto his back, pulling Sandy towards him so she lay on his chest. They began to kiss, their lips meeting in soft kisses that said more than words could. Sandy felt his warmth and calmness, and these moments seemed to be filled with silent harmony. After about 5 minutes of kissing and intense petting, Sandy said, "You know, you didn't have to be so pushy with me today. I was going to give you the chance to have sex with me anyway. I just wanted to tease you a little." Steve got out of bed and started getting dressed. He replied, "I think I lost my patience a little, but it was worth it. I've wanted you since the day I saw you and your husband move in, and you know, this is not the last time." Sandy put on her robe and said, "Just do me a favor, Steve, next time wait for an invitation." Steve wasn't going to let her have the last word, so he added as he left, "Just don't make me wait too long." Sandy took the sheets off the bed and took them to the laundry room. She then made the bed with clean sheets and blankets before going to the bathroom and running a bath of water. Standing in front of the mirror, she noticed a coin-sized hickey on her neck. She understood that it would not be possible to hide him from Alex. After Sandy finished her bath, she returned to her room and sat at the dressing table in front of the mirror. She combed her hair and applied makeup and eyeliner. Then she fastened the thin chain around her neck and put on small matching earrings. Sandy then attached a hot wife bracelet to her ankle and headed to her closet to choose what to wear. She decided to wear her sexiest white push-up bra and matching panties from Victoria's Secret. Over it, she put on the sheer white blouse she had worn that morning and a short black skirt. Every time Alex asked her to wear that skirt, she called it her sex skirt. Sandy looked at herself in the mirror. Her hair didn't hide the hickey enough to make it invisible. She combed her hair back and tied it in a ponytail. She then tied a purple bow and put on black high heels. Sandy made herself a cocktail and went out onto the terrace. Alex was supposed to be home soon. Alex left work early to make it to his doctor's appointment. He made an appointment for his annual physical a week ago and mentioned to his GP that he needed to discuss a sensitive physical issue. He arrived at the clinic, where he was met by a sweet young nurse. "Good afternoon, Mr. Blair. Please take a seat. Dr. Reese will be ready to see you shortly." Alex had already seen this young nurse at previous appointments at the clinic. She was a petite girl of Asian descent. Alex always noticed how she reminded him of his wife Sandy with her petite frame and small breasts. Alex sat in the lobby and watched as a young couple tried to keep their children occupied while they waited in line. He picked up the magazine and began flipping through the pages. An advertisement for sex pills caught his attention. Alex had been going to Dr. Janet Reese for 6 years since his previous doctor, Dr. Taylor, retired. At first, he felt uncomfortable that his doctor was a woman, but decided to give her a chance since she replaced Dr. Taylor. Over time, Alex became accustomed to Janet as his doctor, and they began calling each other by their first names. However, he was extremely embarrassed to discuss his sex life with her. It seemed to him the most humiliating moment in his life. The nurse opened the door and said, "Alex, Dr. Reese will be ready in a minute. Come in." Alex followed the sweet young nurse into one of the exam rooms, where she asked him to take off his shoes and shirt. Alex did as she asked as the nurse placed his chart on the table. Looking at Alex as he unbuttoned his shirt and took it off, the nurse blushed slightly and smiled. She then took his blood pressure and temperature, recorded the data on the card, and left the room, leaving the door open. She walked past the room several times, each time sneaking a glance at the shirtless Alex. Dr. Reese entered the room and closed the door behind her. She smiled at Alex and said, "I think it's best to close the door so my nurse can concentrate on her work. It seems to me that these young girls today have only one thing on their mind." Alex noticed that Janet was wearing casual clothes instead of her usual blue uniform. She was wearing jeans that showed off her slender body well. For a woman in her mid-40s, she looked much younger. Apart from a few gray hairs in her dark brown hair, she could easily pass for 30. She was wearing a blue blouse that fit perfectly on her thin waist and rather impressive breasts. Dr. Janet Reese put on her reading glasses and studied the map for a few minutes. Then she turned to Alex and put on the stethoscope. As he stood up, Alex couldn't help but glance at her long, slender figure. Janet touched the cold stethoscope to his chest and said, "Take a deep breath and exhale. Again, okay, Alex, now strip down to your underwear. I'll be right back." After a couple of minutes, Janet returned and continued checking reflexes and performing other tests. Then she walked over to the closet, reached up, and pulled out a box of rubber gloves. Alex didn't even pay attention to the gloves. His gaze was glued to her figure as she reached for the top shelf. A moment later, she was standing in front of Alex, putting on her glove. Janet said, "Well, Alex, let's get up and take off our shorts." Alex replied, "Janet, I hope you're not going to do what I'm thinking about." "That's right, Alex. You've put it off for too long. But first I have to make sure you don't have a hernia." Alex blushed with embarrassment, but reluctantly lowered his boxer shorts to the floor. Janet reached down, picked them up as he freed his legs, and placed the shorts with the rest of his clothes. "Well, it's not so scary, right?" Alex replied. "Maybe for you, Janet, this is not a big deal, but for me, it's a little difficult. I've never taken my clothes off in front of a female doctor before. Please cough." Alex did as she asked, and the doctor pressed on the other side, asking him to cough again. Alex had had this procedure before, but never with a female doctor. Janet took off her glove, but immediately put on a new one. "Okay, Alex, now turn around and lean over the examination table." Alex looked at her with the look of an offended puppy, but Janet was adamant. "Alex, turn around and bend over. It won't be that bad, I promise." Alex turned and slowly leaned over the table. He looked back at Janet and asked, "So, doctor?" Janet walked around the table and directed Alex to place his hands on the side rails. Then, walking around him from behind, she asked him to spread his legs slightly. She began to probe what is usually checked during such procedures. "That's it, Alex. You are free. You can get dressed," she said. Alex straightened up and turned around, but Janet noticed how he quickly put on his boxers to hide his slight arousal. Smiling, Janet said, "Don't be embarrassed, Alex. It is normal for a patient to react to a doctor's actions, especially if she is a woman. Believe me, I'm used to it. You seem to be fine. By the way, did you say that you have something that is bothering you?" Alex replied, "Well, Janet, since I'm already more confused than you can imagine, yes, I have something that's bothering me." Janet replied, "Alex, you have nothing to be shy with me. I am a doctor. Besides, you are a very attractive man. Didn't you notice the way my nurse was looking at you? I think she wanted to be present for the entire examination." After a short pause, she continued, "Alex, don't put on your pants yet. Sit on the edge of the examination table." Alex sat on the edge of the table, wearing only his boxers and white socks. Janet moved the stool closer and said, "Okay, Alex, tell me everything. I am your doctor and have already heard all sorts of stories. Pour out your soul and I will try to help you." Alex replied, "I can't get excited. This seems to be ruining my marriage. You know, Sandy is much younger than me and has a greater sexual appetite than I can satisfy." Janet looked into his eyes carefully. She saw his pain and felt that he had not told everything. Her first major was in psychology. She replied, "This is normal for men your age, and it can be corrected. But it seems to me that you want to say something else. Why are you afraid that Sandy might leave you?" Alex continued, "Well, this may seem strange to you. I'll try to explain briefly. A few years ago, When we started having problems in our sex life, Sandy and I started experimenting a little to spice things up. She liked it when I pretended that I was, for example, the postman or the new neighbor. It turned her on, and it turned me on too. After a short pause, he continued. After a year of such games, we began to engage in what we call pillow talk. If Sandy wanted sex, she would start touching me to see if I would have a reaction. If she wasn't there, she would tell me how someone looked at her or tried to court her. She did it so sensually that sometimes it turned me on and we had sex. Janet asked, "This is all? So far what you've said sounds pretty normal. Many couples spice up their intimate life with games or daring fantasies." Alex replied, "Lately, she's been asking more and more often if I fantasize about how she would be with other men." One day, playing on her desires, I said that maybe it would be okay if she wanted to try being with someone else. I didn't think she would take it seriously, but then she started talking about a coworker who was interested in her. What really scares me is that she admitted that he was tempting her and that she found it difficult to resist. She added that if she were single, she would sleep with him. But both of us have never made such fantasies come true. Usually, it just gets us excited for sex, but even then, I don't have the stamina. Janet was silent for a moment and then replied, "There is nothing unusual in what is happening between you. Sandy is younger and may not have fully explored her sexuality before marriage. All couples have fewer intimate moments over time, but I'm sure I can help you." Janet then asked, "I would like to do something that could be considered unethical for a doctor. I don't want to lose my license, so I can't even tell you what exactly this is about. You have to say to yourself that you agree without knowing what it is. Can you do this?" Alex replied, "If you can help me, Janet, you can do whatever you want to me, and I won't tell anyone." Janet said, "Okay, Alex, lie down on the examination table." She then began to lightly run her fingertips over his chest and stomach to the top of his boxer shorts. Alex noticed the sparkling diamond ring on Dr. Janet's left ring finger. Just a few weeks ago, he was playing golf with her husband. Now he told her about his problems in sex and marriage. When Alex looked into Janet's eyes, he noticed her gaze and felt a slight tension. "She's testing me to see how sensitive I am," he thought. Janet unbuttoned his shirt to better see Alex's reaction. She then turned to the counter, made a few notes, and returned to him, putting on a medical glove and preparing some of the special product. "Okay, Alex, so far everything is within normal limits. Now I'll apply a little product and let's see how your body reacts," she said. Janet carefully began to run her hand over his shoulder, placing her other hand on his chest. Alex glanced at his wedding ring and then back at Janet. He felt a little awkward, but tried to remain calm. Janet noted his reaction in her notes, removed the glove, and made a few more notes. Continuing to write something in her notes, Janet very professionally said, "You can get dressed now, Alex. I think I have something that will help you in the lovemaking department." As she got dressed, Alex continued, "You will receive a prescription for medicine that you will take about an hour before making love. Not only will you notice arousal and stamina, but you'll likely feel a slight increase in size." Alex responded, "Thanks, Doc. I really think this will get our marriage back on track. Honestly, Janet, I'm very glad I have you as a doctor. I would feel very strange if old Dr. Taylor gave me this test." Janet replied, "Don't worry, Alex. Old Dr. Taylor wouldn't have examined you the same way I did. Are there different medications to solve this problem? Most doctors just prescribe the medicine and wait to see if you are satisfied with the results." Janet handed the recipe to Alex and continued, "I was able to determine the best medicine for you through my own experience. By the way, Alex, I wouldn't normally do this for someone simple." Alex hasn't quite gotten over the fact that Dr. Janet Reese seems to have a crush on him. He simply thanked her for everything and went back to the nurse to cover his copay. However, before he could leave, Janet came into the lobby and said she wanted to see him again in a month. While Alex headed to the pharmacy to pick up a prescription, Sandy made herself a margarita and wondered what she should do with her husband. Alex would probably notice the hickey on her neck, and she decided not to try to hide it. She pulled her hair back into a ponytail to make it easy to see around her neck. Sandy knew that Alex would not become violent, as he had always been very gentle with her during their marriage and allowed her to make all the important decisions. Sandy takes her husband's training to the next level. Sandy heard a car door close in the driveway and knew her husband was home from work. She arranged the chairs at the patio table so that Alex was sitting to her left. This will prevent him from noticing the mark on the right side of her neck until she is ready to see him. A couple of minutes later, Alex came out to her. He sat down in the chair to Sandy's left and said, "Wow, Sandy, you look really good after your day off." He noticed that she was wearing a sheer white blouse, with a white push-up bra and a short black skirt visible through the blouse. He looked at her feet and noticed that she was wearing black high heels and a sexy thin gold chain around her ankle. "Are you dressed up like that for me, Sandy?" Sandy didn't answer and looked a little distant. She raised her margarita glass and took a sip. When she turned her head slightly to look at Alex, he noticed that her eyes were shining and tears were starting to well up in them. "What happened, Sandy?" he asked. Sandy didn't answer, so Alex continued. "Today I went to see Dr. Reese for a checkup. She said I was fine. Then I plucked up the courage to talk to her about my problem with sex. Wait, Sandy, when we go to bed tonight, you'll think this is a completely different man. The doctor gave me a prescription for a drug that she said would help me get aroused more easily and maintain my stamina longer. She even said that he would make it larger in size." Sandy asked, "So have you already taken the recipe?" Putting the bottle of medicine on the table, he replied, "Yes, I picked it up on the way home. This is what the doctor said is best for my symptoms." When Sandy looked at the label, he added, "That should make it easier for me to get aroused without all the role-playing and dirty talk." Sandy replied, "That's good, Alex, but I like role-playing games and talking in bed. We're not doing this just to turn you on, and I don't want to give that up. You shouldn't have bought this for me. I like to come up with naughty ways to get you going." Alex replied, "It's okay, Sandy, if you want, we can continue. But this drug will enhance our lovemaking and make our sexual fantasies even more vivid. You'll see, wait until we try." Sandy said, "Oh, I'm looking forward to it too, dear. I hope this drug helps you. Do you want to go up there and try it now?" Alex replied, "Dr. Reese said I need to take the pill an hour before sex to get the full effect." Sandy opened the bottle cap and handed the pill to her husband. "Here, Alex, take it and go upstairs, take a shower, and when you're done, come down for me." Alex went to the kitchen to wash down the pill with a glass of water and then went upstairs to shower. Sandy went to the kitchen to make herself another drink. She returned to the patio with a cocktail and began to think about what she was going to tell Alex. After she finished her drink, Sandy returned to the house just as she heard the water turn off in the shower. Alex walked down the stairs, wrapping himself in a towel. Only 20 minutes had passed. He looked into Sandy's big brown eyes, leaned down to kiss her, and then took her hand and led her upstairs to the bedroom. Once in the bedroom, Sandy said, "Alex, do you know how Steve from down the street is constantly trying to flirt with me?" Alex replied, "Yes, he's a ladies' man. He always tells me about different women he wants to sleep with." Sandy unzipped her skirt and let it fall to the floor. Now she looked exactly the same as in the morning, standing at the window before Steve arrived. She stood in her black high heels. Her sheer white blouse barely covered the sexy bikini panties she was wearing, and her white push-up bra showed through the fabric of her blouse. She looked amazing and completely irresistible. Sandy continued, "Did Steve ever tell you how much he wanted to get into my pants?" "Actually, about a year ago at a party you wore a black one-piece swimsuit. Steve was pretty drunk and told me he wanted to swap wives with me for the night. I asked him why he wanted to do this." Sandy asked, "What did he say to that?" Alex replied, "Well, he told me he's been wanting to get into your panties since the day we moved in. Knowing that he was drunk, I asked him what his wife would think of the idea. Sandy began to unbutton the front of her blouse and asked, "And what did he say to that?" Alex replied, "He said he would find a way to convince her. Steve said it would be worth putting you to bed." Sandy asked, "Are you excited about the idea of switching partners for the night?" Alex replied, "I admit that the thought of sex with Linda got me a little excited, and the thought of Steve getting you got me excited too. I think it was when we were doing a little role play in bed and I pretended to be a neighbor." Sandy asked, "What do you think he would do if he saw me standing in front of the big window in the living room, dressed like I am now?" Alex replied, "I don't know. I think he might take it as an invitation. Why are you asking all these questions about Steve?" Alex saw tears in Sandy's eyes again. She turned to her left and tilted her head so Alex could see the mark on her neck. Then, turning to face him, she stopped and looked at him. Alex moved closer to Sandy and looked at her neck. He felt a slight sickness in his stomach, and his heart started beating faster when he realized that his sweet little wife was with another man. Alex mumbled, "Please, Sandy, tell me you didn't have sex with." Sandy replied, "Steve saw me in the window this morning just like I'm standing here right now. A little later, when I was sitting on the patio, he invited himself to come in. He asked me for a cup of coffee. I asked him, 'Wait on the patio when I come for him.' While I was drinking his coffee, he came into the house." Sandy noticed that her husband was getting excited. She continued, "I asked him to wait on the patio, but he came in while I was pouring him a cup of coffee. He told me he wanted to see me take off my clothes. Alex, he scared me so much that I begged him to leave." Alex responded, "No, Sandy, don't tell me you had sex with our neighbor. What were you doing standing in front of the window dressed like that?" He started at Alex. He was putting on a show in front of his window, so I decided to tease him a little, just to see how far he would go. "So you let him come here and have sex with you? I don't believe it, Sandy." "It wasn't like that, Alex. I begged him to leave. I told him to just go home and I would show him what he wanted to see through the window. But he insisted that I take off my top, so I thought he was leaving, but instead he picked me up and carried me here." Sandy noticed that Alex looked slightly embarrassed under the towel and smiled at him, wanting to ease the tension. "Alex, it seems like what happened really bothered you," she said with a smile. Alex took off his towel and their eyes met for a moment. He placed his hand on her shoulder as if trying to protect and comfort her. "Did he hurt you, Sandy? If so, I promise that." Sandy interrupted him, trying to calm him down. "No, Alex, everything is fine. At first I was scared, but then I realized that everything was not as scary as it seemed. My body and mind came into harmony, and I simply stopped being afraid." Alex slowly unbuttoned Sandy's blouse, allowing it to slide off her shoulders and fall to the floor. He looked at her tenderly, and Sandy leaned over and touched his hand. "Alex," she said quietly, "I know what you're going through, but you're here, nearby, and that's the most important thing to me. You love me and want to be close to me, despite all the difficulties, and that's enough for me." Alex carefully unclasped Sandy's bra, allowing it to slide from her shoulders to the floor. He gently hugged her, holding her close to him, and his right hand slowly slid down her back, encircling her figure. "I knew that sooner or later you would find someone else, because there are so many temptations around. You are so attractive and innocent, men always pay attention to you," he said with a soft smile. Alex lifted Sandy up, and she wrapped her legs around his waist before they fell into a passionate kiss. He whispered, "Now I will show you what you deserve more than anything in this world, and how much I love you." He carefully laid her down on the bed, continuing to kiss her. Sandy responded to his touch with equal tenderness and passion, allowing her emotions to take over. Every gesture was full of love and care. Alex pressed himself against her, kissing her neck and touching her skin with light touches, as if enjoying every moment. Sandy threw her head back, feeling a wave of happiness and warmth filling her heart. They were together, sharing this special moment where time seemed to stand still. Alex felt their closeness, felt how she reacted to him. Sandy was completely open, and her trust made this moment even more valuable. Sandy rose up so she was on top. She looked into Alex's eyes and whispered with a smile, "I want to be by your side, always and in everything." Their mutual tenderness filled the room, and passion and emotions intertwined, creating an atmosphere of complete harmony and love. Sandy and Alex felt that there were no barriers between them at that moment, and that was the most important thing for both of them. "Alex, I love you so much, baby. I'll never do anything to hurt you. I promise you that," she said. Sandy lay on the bed, breathing heavily, trying to come to her senses. She looked at Alex, trying to figure out if he was playing a role during their intimacy or if he really wanted her to be a girl of easy virtue. "Alex, I can be a girl of easy virtue if that's what you really want," she said. Alex didn't answer, continuing to look at the ceiling. "Alex, if you want me to become a promiscuous wife, you need to tell me about it," she insisted. Alex replied, "You already did it, Sandy. Are you saying that you won't cheat on me again if I don't want you to?" "Alex, that's not the point. I wasn't looking for someone to sleep with today. He came here, and I knew right away that he was going to get me," she said. "To get you? The two of you showed off yourselves to each other in the window," he replied. Sandy responded, "You weren't at home, Alex. I'm telling you, he wasn't going to take no for an answer. I gave in to him because it would have been worse if I tried to resist." "But you liked it, Sandy. You said to yourself that you couldn't refuse when you saw how he was left naked. Admit it, you liked it," Alex insisted. "I didn't like that he came to the house without an invitation from the very beginning, Alex. When he told me to take off my clothes, I argued with him and begged him to leave," she said. "He shouted at me to take off the short top I was wearing. I cried and begged him to leave. He scared me, and I took off my top. And yes, standing naked in front of him made me aroused, but not because I wanted it," she explained. "And when he carried me upstairs to the bedroom, my body betrayed me. I felt excited," she added. Alex said, "I have to go to him right now and punch Steve in the face." Sandy replied, "There are other ways to get even with someone, Alex. If you fight him, you will be imprisoned for assault. Trust me, we can come up with a plan against Steve." "What's the plan, Sandy?" "This man comes to our house, pretends that he is our friend, and meanwhile he plans how to sleep with my wife," he said. Sandy replied, "You can't even imagine how things could turn out, Alex. Also, he mentioned the exchange of partners at the party, remember?" Alex objected. "What are you talking about, Sandy? Even if we had gone for it, he would still have been ahead of me. This will only add problems to our marriage. How would you feel the next morning if you found out that I slept with Steve's wife, Linda?" The idea of a partnership exchange was completely new to Sandy. Today, she slept with Steve, and last week, John also helped her break her oath of allegiance. She lay on the bed, silently thinking about how she would feel if her husband slept with another woman. Alex also lay silently, thinking about what was happening. His wife has already slept with another man. Will this be the last time, or is she now more likely to succumb to temptation along with others? He thought about how Janet, Dr. Reese, had pleasured him in the office today, and about that pretty nurse who always shows interest in him when he comes to the clinic. Finally, he thought about Steve's wife, Linda, and whether he should sleep with her to get revenge for what happened. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.